Well, good evening, everybody. Looks like everybody's made their way out of the waiting room. We're glad you could join us this afternoon for those of you who are on the West Coast, and this evening for those of you who are closer to the East Coast. We're aware that this is a national gathering, and that as we speak in the West, fires are raging. In the South, there are devastating floods. From ocean to ocean, the country finds itself in a long overdue but difficult conversation about race. And everywhere people are suffering from a pandemic. And oh, did I mention that there's an election? It's a challenging time. And we hope and pray that those of you with us tonight are okay. And we also pray that those of us gathering together this evening do all that we can to ease the suffering and to be a vessel of hope. I would like to open this evening with a prayer that is actually the contemporary lyrics of a traditional Welsh melody. This comes from the website of Network, which is represented by our speaker this evening. Let us pray. O God of all the nations, your ancient prophets saw that kings and institutions are not above the law. Integrity is precious, and truth will one day stand. Your way is peace and justice, and love is your command. O God, when times are troubled, when lies are seen as truth, when power-hungry people draw praise and not reproof, when greed is seen as greatness, when justice is abused, we pray that those who lead us will know what they must choose. We pray they'll gather wisdom and lift up high ideals to guide our struggling nation along a path that heals. We pray they'll have the vision to value each good law, to put aside ambition, to seek the best for all. O God of all the nations, may those who lead us see that justice is your blessing, that truth will set us free. Give all of us the courage to seek the nobler way, so in this land that we cherish, the good will win the day. Amen. Well, welcome to this September 17th edition of Acting for Justice While Sheltering in Place. Sister Simone Campbell is the Executive Director of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, a federal advocacy organization founded by Catholic sisters to lobby in Washington, D.C. for policies that mend the gaps in income and wealth in the United States. As many of you know, she has led 6 cross-country nuns on the bus trips focused on tax justice, healthcare, economic justice, comprehensive immigration reform, voter turnout, bridging divides in politics and society, and mending the gaps. Sister Simone wrote the famous Nuns Letter, considered by many as critically important in convincing Congress to support the Affordable Care Act in 2010, and is the author of A Nun on the Bus, How All of Us Can Create Hope, Change, and Community, published by HarperCollins. She has received numerous awards, spoke at the 2012 Democratic National Convention, and has appeared on 60 Minutes, The Colbert Report, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. She's a religious leader, attorney, and poet with extensive experience in public policy and advocacy for systemic change. Sister Simone, we are so glad to have you with us tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Jack. And I just scrolled through the various panels of people. I see a bunch of people I know, so this is great. I feel like I'm among friends and family. Perfect. And isn't that what we hunger for, at least I hunger for, during this COVID time? And when we are so often separated, alone, trying to deal with relationships through Zoom. I know my sister and brother-in-law live not that far away, and I haven't seen them since February because my brother-in-law has some medical conditions we have to be really careful of. But as I was preparing, I was thinking how important it is to have a chance to gather together across boundaries and be able to talk about this election time and how do we approach it. And so I want to take some time today to talk about what I think we're called to in this moment. And the story that you started with, Jack, about bringing faith to our politics, I think is really important because there's a part of me that does feel like we're at a similar risky period for our democracy. And we, people of faith, need to speak up. Now, Pope Francis has, who I'm going to refer to a bunch of times tonight, but he has said that a good Christian meddles in politics. And in fact, that was on the back of the bus a couple of times. And it's actually on on our new virtual bus that I'll talk about at the end. But what he says in Joy of the Gospel is, which was his first exhortation done in 2013, I think. He says, I ask God to give us more politicians capable of sincere and effective dialogue aimed at healing the deepest roots and not simply the appearances of the evils in our world. Then he goes on to say, politics, though often denigrated, remains a lofty vocation and one of the highest forms of charity inasmuch as it seeks the common good. As I reread that, preparing for this talk tonight, I felt, oh my gosh, don't we need effective dialogue aimed at healing the deepest roots of the evils in our society? I'm so glad you're going to talk about the racial justice issues. The issues of racism in our nation are so rife that that's one of the deepest evils that we deal with at Network. But it's also the income and wealth disparity that exists in our nation. It's so frustrating that policies continue to exploit, laws continue to favor those at the top. Well, the 80% of our population struggles. It's just wrong. And the hard part is policies are making it happen. So that's why we need to be engaged in the political reality in order to change those policies. And I think one of the things that COVID has done in the midst of all of the dislocation and the hardships, it has raised the issue that we indeed are in this together. I was reading an article a couple of days ago about somebody who didn't know they were contagious and was just walking around visiting people and managed to spread the disease. And isn't that the challenge that we face? It's realizing that we impact each other without even knowing it. And I think at the heart of our Christian faith is the knowledge that we're in this together. But somehow, once we get to politics, we think we're by ourselves or something. I don't know. So what I want to do is to spend some time working with what is this hunger for the common good, solving the problems, the evils of our time. How do we enter into that? Because I don't know about you, but I would guess that you're like me, and there's always somebody in the family that's difficult to talk to about politics, or in my friendship circles where we'll talk about a lot of things. We'll talk about the virus, we'll talk about whatever, just not politics, please. Well, I hope tonight maybe that we can develop some skills or some capacity to be able to speak together, even with folks who disagree, about what matters. And then, of course, I have my plan for my difficult relatives, and you might appreciate this. My plan is I want to create a lending library of difficult relatives, because my hunch is you would be better with my difficult relatives, and I would be better with yours. So come Thanksgiving dinner, we could check them out. I'll send you mine, you send me yours. We'd have a much better Thanksgiving table conversation, right? So I'm sure we're not going to solve that problem entirely, since the lending library is closed during COVID. But I think we can gain some skills and some ability that may help us during the 40 some days that are left until the election, and following the election, the work that we have to do to heal our nation, regardless of what happens. Okay, you game? All right. So one of the things that we have learned at Network that's critical, and actually there was some polling just last week that helped validate it, is that rather than starting conversations like, well, who are you going to vote for president or senator or governor or mayor? Don't start there. Don't start with the political engagement, because we people of faith need to lead with, as I look at this election, I'm really concerned to see my faith values in candidates. I'm really concerned, and then whatever your faith values are, for me, I'm really seeking candidates who have integrity, a sense of truth, and above all, some kindness and compassion. That's what I'm seeking in a candidate. What are you seeking in a candidate? Could be the conversation. And in that conversation, what we've learned at Network is that brings forward our better selves and gets us to a frame of thinking where we're thinking about our faith not as a religious set of doctrine, but rather as this embodiment of how do we live? What are the values that we want to have embodied in our political leadership? And quite frankly, they don't talk too much about it. One of our staff who's on the communications team submitted a question for the presidential debates, which we're sure it's not going to get in, but we're trying, about what are your faith values that you believe should be in a leader in our nation? I would like to see the candidates respond to it. It could be amusing, or it could be very depressing. But I think that's where we should start. The values I'm looking for, what are you looking for? And can you see how that changes the conversation? And if you lead with what you care about, like integrity, kindness, compassion, truthfulness, if you lead with that, then there's a measure where you could have conversation together about how you talk about that. So and this becomes especially important for the Catholics on this call, where it often gets reduced to a single issue of yes or no on abortion. Okay, so bless me, sisters and brothers, for I did sin in the 1980s. And I should do my ad. Can I do my advertisement? I have a new book. I have to update my bio because I have a brand new book, came out yesterday, Hunger for Hope. And as I was writing this book, what I realized was I had committed a social sin in the 1980s when the right got all into the anti-abortion, that's the only thing a Catholic should care about. I didn't want to be identified with the right. So what I did was, my sin was, I withdrew completely and I didn't say anything. And that left the whole field of faith and Catholic to a very conservative, very narrow, very, I would say now, mistaken point of view. And so my sin, I'm trying to atone for. So I'm trying to learn how to do this. And what I've discovered is if I start with the values I care about, integrity, kindness, compassion, then I can indeed go to where Pope Francis goes and say, caring for the unborn is critically important. And then he goes on to say, in his exhortation on holiness, equally sacred, however, are the lives of the poor, those already born, the destitute, the abandoned, and the underprivileged, the vulnerable, infirm, and elderly exposed to covert euthanasia, the victims of human trafficking, new forms of slavery, and every form of rejection. And further on, he talks about equally sacred are the needs of the immigrants, the non-Christians, those who are marginalized, those who are left out of our care. And further on, he talks about care for the earth. And it's that equally sacred conversation that I think we have a responsibility to lift up. Now, I had this conversation, okay, election time, and everybody calls us at Network, and I have like a million of these conversations about abortion and, that we should, and today's was about, well, we ought to reverse Roe v. Wade. Okay, but how does that care for the unborn? And that's the thing that I've come to realize is care for the unborn is much, much more than whether or not a woman has a right to choose abortion. Now, I also realized in today's conversation that the idea that we must outlaw a woman's right to choose is so denigrating of the capacity of women to make moral choices that I find it highly offensive. I actually got kind of upset with this guy because he kept going on. It's often older guys who have these conversations with me. So it's like, oh, all right. But I couldn't get him to see how not believing in a woman's capacity to make a good moral choice was denigrating really the dignity of women. And that it's about our being able to help women carry a fetus to term. So in my atonement for my sin of silence for all those years, we have taken up Pope Francis's teaching and have created our equally sacred scorecard, which I imagine some of you have seen, which I'm really pretty excited about, because what we've done is to say care for the unborn is critically important. It's critically important to care for life. But caring for the unborn can be, one way is to criminalize abortion. Though quite frankly, my approach is that we've been having this fight for almost 50 years. I'd rather actually care for the unborn and leave this fight. Care for the unborn so that women don't feel cornered into making a choice that ends life. And we know that during Democratic administrations, the abortion rate goes down much faster than during Republican administrations, because Republicans focus on criminalization of abortion. Democrats focus on providing health care, child support, child care, all the nutrition, all the supports that a woman needs to carry an infant to term. So in this complex world, one approach is criminalize abortion. My preferred approach is to make it so that women don't make that choice. But I do trust women to make a good moral choice. That could be kind of controversial. So I can hardly wait for the question and answer part. We'll have a great conversation about that. But what Pope Francis raises in this equally sacred is that it raises for me the fact that President Trump's policy is to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is about overturning a woman's right to choose. Whereas Vice President Biden, his approach is increasing pregnant women's access to health care and nutrition, and especially addressing the issues of maternal mortality, and a fact that especially in the African American community, there's such a high rate of maternal and infant mortality in pregnancy, and that is the nexus of his pro-life work. Okay, now this isn't for the press, so if press is on here, here's cone of silence, okay? Cone of silence for the press. After I prayed did my prayer at the convention on the Friday after, I get a call from the vice president to say thank you. It was very dear. It was kind of like, Oh my gosh, oh, talking on the phone. Anyway, but we got into this conversation about abortion and his huge concern for the dignity of women and that women have the support that they need, and how that gets lost too often in the politicized fight. And then he ended by saying, how could I force my view on our whole nation? I don't think that's right. Let's work to make sure women are cared for. I thought, I'm in. That's good. All right, end cone of silence. But that's just a personal thing about him as a person. But what we came to also see is that it's not just the unborn, but when we look at policies such as the tax code is a big driver for people's capacity to live in dignity. Right now, families who or adults who don't have minor children get taxed into poverty if they don't qualify for the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit. They can get taxed into poverty. There's not laws for enough wages, and there's not government subsidy for people to live in dignity. That's a pro-life issue. It's a pro-life issue on racism. I mean, Pope Francis has been abundantly clear on that. Racism is anti-life. And we've got to find ways to embrace and acknowledge our past. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen this. It's getting fame because President Trump is out attacking it, which I find mildly amusing, because that will really bolster it. But the 1619 Project, done by the New York Times, I highly recommend it. It's got podcasts as well as, if you're a podcast listener, as well as written work. It is excellent in the explanation of how we got to where we are and in the slave trade from 1619 forward. But it's our responsibility, if we're pro-life, to work to end racism and to create an equitable society where all can flourish. And then sometime invite me back and I'll talk about this whole thing I'm doing on doctrine of discovery and colonialism. And that's a whole nother thing. You have some materials on that. So go to your chapters on that and invite me back some point. But the other piece that I really wanted to lift up to focus on is how the focus on life means that if we are pro-life, then we must provide all of the capacity for people to live a dignified life. And one of the biggest challenges right now is housing. And the COVID-19 pandemic has pointed this out, where people are living in such crowded conditions or homeless on the streets and not able to keep themselves safe. It's also critically important that they have adequate nutrition, that everyone have access to adequate nutrition and healthcare. I think it is shocking that the Trump administration has consistently tried to end the Affordable Care Act for political reasons without having a plan for how 20 million people who got healthcare because of the Affordable Care Act. But absent a plan, they just want to do away with it for political gain. It breaks my heart that caring for life is reduced to a political game. It's wrong. But I'll tell you why the Republicans are really having a hard time coming up with an alternative. Nobody talks about this. But the fact is, the Affordable Care Act was modeled on the Republican plan. And the whole idea, the reason they modeled it on the Republican plan was to try to create this bipartisan agreement. Well, it got so, the Republican Senate was so reactionary, they couldn't bear to agree to something. So they couldn't, if the Republicans had been smart, they would have declared, wow, the Democrats don't have anything to offer. They took the Republican plan and that's the only thing they could put forward. This is our plan. It was true, but they couldn't agree because of politics. So I think what we have to do as people of faith is keep ensuring that our people have access to health care. Some of you are in states where Medicaid has not been expanded, and so the very poor don't have access. We've got to change that. It's not faithful. It's not pro-life to have people in our nation without access. So we've got to oppose these cuts. We've got to make sure that our people have access to care. And then finally, I want to talk just a little bit about to be pro-life is also to be for an immigration policy that is humane, that recognizes the dignity of immigrants, that cares for those who are forced to migrate. The fact of our utter disregard as a nation right now for immigration and the shocking revelation of these women subjected, or the allegation that these women were subjected to hysterectomies against their will or without their knowledge, is truly horrifying. And we, people of faith, need to say, if that's true, that's wrong, and our nation needs to atone. We need to stop it. And I will say that one of the dominant problems in all this is that these private prisons, these private detention facilities, there's no accountability. The inspector generals really don't have a right to free inspections. They only can go in after a problem has been reported. Well, as you can tell from the stories that are coming out about this private detention facility, is there were problems reported, they just weren't passed on. So until this brave nurse talked about it publicly, nobody knew. So we as a nation need to ensure that our immigration policy recognizes the dignity of all people, even those who have moved and come to our nation. We also need to recognize that our trade policy is creating the need for a lot of this movement. I mean, the biggest driver of migration is economic reality, and the second biggest driver is climate change. It's only going to get worse unless we get a handle on climate change, unless we get a handle on trade policy, and unless we wake up as a nation that we're actually dependent on migrants. One of the things is that our nation is reluctant to change our immigration policy. It's because business benefits from exploiting the migrants, like those in the meatpacking plants. Those are principally undocumented migrants who then got COVID, but were exploited in the process. So we have some work to be done. We have some work to do. We need to be able to articulate that our values are rooted in what we care about as a person of faith. What are your values that you want to see in a leader? I've told you mine. They're all about integrity, kindness, compassion, and a willingness to lead. Well, that's not exactly a faith perspective, but that's what I want. But integrity, kindness, and compassion are really the heart of what I'm looking for. I'm curious what you're looking for. And that if we come with those three characteristics and apply it to a pro-life stance, which is way more than a single issue, that we are called to, as Pope Francis says, to honor the sacredness of all life at all phases. And for me, quite frankly, honoring the sacredness of life means that I honor the sacredness of women's lives and trust that they will make moral choices if provided the supports that they need. I'm pro-life and I'm pro-choice. We don't have to accept the labels. I'm actually pro-Catholic is mostly what it is. I'm pro-Jesus. But what we have to do is to ensure that our faith values get expressed in the common conversation. So as I atone for my sin, as I try to learn how to speak in an area that is inclusive, that is welcoming, that can make our nation and our world a better place, let us commit to being multi-issue voters and to be willing to talk about them. And if I can't talk to some of my difficult relatives about this, I'm more than willing to talk to yours. And I'll recruit you to talk to mine. Because the one thing, among the things we have learned at Network, is having difficult conversations. You have to come with a sense of being centered, grounded, and not having a whole bunch of history that you will pop out of your mouth at the time you least expect it. We also need to be interested in learning what the person we're talking to values, and then using those values to be able to engage my values and to move the conversation forward. Those are the kinds of conversations you have in Just Faith all the time. That's some of the richness of the program. And that's probably some of what you missed once you graduate. If you got to have another chapter or another way of connecting. Because those meaningful conversations where you really do delve into an issue and explore what matters, it's what our nation is desperate for right now. We have got to get beyond the sound bites, the talking heads, the fight, and talk about what matters. It matters to me that our nation work for the common good, respects all of life, cares for the planet, and ensures that we can all flourish and no one is exploited, no one is denigrated, no one is left out of my care. So, I am a Pope Francis voter. I try very hard to follow what Pope Francis says. And what I've discovered is, then I'm following in the footsteps of Jesus, who's the one that ultimately matters. But blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the clean of heart. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Let's hunger and thirst. Let's do this together. We can make a difference in our nation. And then after the election, regardless of what happens, we're going to need to work together to heal our nation and to have many, many of these conversations where we can share our values, share what we care about, and make a difference for our future. Now let's have questions and answers. I'm excited.
Sister Simone, thank you. Regarding talking about difficult issues with our family, someone once said to me, redeem the world, but leave your family for somebody else. But related to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I tell you a story? When I used to talk, around, and I'd rag on my brother Jim. I used my brother Jim as my difficult relative to talk to, and rah, 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 Jim, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm the oldest, he's the youngest, and all the family dynamics and all this. Well, do you know what happened? Is I forget, about 2 years ago, the last time on the bus in 2018, somebody asked me about the bus, okay? But in 2018, I got onto some viral thing that went wild, and on his he's always on Facebook, and so on his Facebook page, somebody was attacking me and all this. Well, my sister found his post where he stood up for me, and he said, "I'm standing up for my good friend and my sister." And I thought, oh, isn't that the sweetest thing ever? So I realized that it was more about family dynamics than it was really about politics. I really had to change my understanding of that dynamic, and I can't rag on my brother anymore. He stood up for me.
Well, related to that sort of family reality, we find ourselves in this country in a very polarized political way. And I know that Network has done some work on trying to bridge the gap in that conversation. Would you share some of that and maybe some of your best practices about how to have those difficult conversations with our closest friends, assuming that somebody else won't do it for you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can't pass off everybody. You gotta engage somebody. Okay, a few things. First is make sure you yourself are centered. Okay, you've got to get into that place where you're grounded, because one of the worst things is if you're not centered, if you're not secure in where you are, then you can go off, and the last is worse than the first. So if you come from a centered space, I find difficult conversations, I'm very mindful of my posture. I keep my posture, I try to stay up straight because my temptation is to lean forward and to get into it. So if I keep my posture straight, okay, and then I don't point my fingers, I keep my hands either together at my side, relaxed. That's physical. The second then is to find out, what does the other person value? So let me think. We were having I had this conversation a couple of days ago about somebody called and they're all upset about immigration, and it's, these immigrants are coming and they're going to take over the world, and why are we in favor of immigrants coming? And I said, well, what are you worried about? What are you worried about? And, well, it's not fair. It's not fair. People are standing in line, and these people aren't standing in line. It's just not fair. So I realized in that their value was unfairness. And so then, okay, if you value, so you're worried about fairness, I can understand that. Let's talk about fairness. What do you think's going on? And then find out, so first hold yourself together, find out what they value, then get some data about what they think is true. Because on any of these issues, people have the wildest ideas, especially on immigration. People don't have a clue about what that means. And so, okay, so it's posture, value, how do they apply that value? And then bringing in, what would you want it to be? See how it goes? It goes from the anger, the resistance, that's not fair. Well, what would fair look like? And one of the things we've discovered is, if we can get a shared value, then it's possible to talk about a shared future that is different, that people can invest in. Does that make sense?
Yes, great, perfect.
Yeah, it's hard to remember. You have to practice it, and you have to know if it's a good day for you to do it. It's not always a good day for me to do it. I can't do it every day. I have to be ready. Probably close to my retreat. After I've done an 8-day retreat, I can handle it.
Sister Simone, as you were speaking, one of the questions that popped up in the screen was, can you apply that to, and I think this is probably a Catholic asking the question, can you apply this to the issue of abortion when somebody feels like, in fact, abortion is the issue that I'm going to vote on, and it is the most important issue because my pastor has said that it's the most important issue?
Right. Okay, here's the challenge. Folks who take what an external authority says, there's this whole cognitive science done by George Lakoff is one, Frameworks Institute is another, and if you're meeting with a person who is doing it just because an authority says it, the style of their thinking, their formation is called a strict father. The alternative is the nurturing parent. And a strict father believes that there needs to be strict rules, rewards, and punishments. And it's a checklist approach. And so there are many priests who are in this strict father approach. They believe that their responsibility is to tell their flock, yes, no, do, don't. And the challenge is when that leadership meets up with a followership that has that bond is really, really tight. And you're not gonna break it. As it says, brush the dust from your feet and go off, find somebody else. But the nurturing parent, on the other hand, and folks who follow nurturing parents, theirs are, and I think most of Just Faith folk fall in this category, this is more about dialogue, exploration, and shared discovery. So that it's not about the strict rules, it's about that engagement in dialogue. Now you'll notice the pieces that I was talking about for having difficult conversations. What we try to do is we try to circumvent these strict rules by going to what you value. And that can be by starting with values, then you can sometimes break through that. I'll tell you, most of the people I talk to feel really ambivalent about just voting on one issue because it just seems too limited, too little. And that's the, but the cognitive science is such that if you're really just voting on one thing, you're not going to change it. But it's that, who I call the muddled middle. How do we think about this? It's got to be something more. And that's where Pope Francis is such a breath of fresh air in expressing that, exploring it. And I hope our equally sacred scorecard is helpful to you in that.
Mm-hmm. Sister Simone, what have you seen to be the most effective strategies? Let me interrupt myself. I'm thinking of Pope Francis's language of encounter or encuentro as kind of a transformative moment, right? That some kind of relationship with our sisters and brothers who are in the marginalized places, in the exploited places, that has the impact of sort of changing our worldview so that we see things differently. Does that seem like, what's the way into that in terms of the political conversation? How do we actually help people see what maybe they can't see because of their background or because they're into the strict father mode or whatever the case might be?
Well, this is what I tried with Paul Ryan whenever I lobbied him was, come meet my people, come meet my people. And, oh, poor Paul Ryan. I miss him actually because he was so much fun to spar with. I enjoyed it, and he enjoyed it, I think too. But that encounter is critical. And that's what, the whole program at Just Faith is so good at, is that getting at this. Our bus trip right now is going to be virtual. We start next Wednesday, September 23rd. And September 23rd. With COVID, I get mixed up on my months. What month?
It's Blur's Day.
Yeah, right. Oh, I need a sign in my house. But one of the things is, so we're going to do 53 or 56 live events that are all virtual. And the great thing about COVID is everybody can join our events. It's great. But we also have a digital map up that has over 70 videos, some of them from site visits that we've done on the bus previously, sisters talking about being a multi-issue voter, a variety of videos. And as we go, we're going to be adding videos. But here's the fun thing, is you can ride the bus and make your own tour. So if you register, on the right hand, it hits register, and then it comes up, you register, then you get your ticket to ride. And when you get your ticket to ride, it's at the bottom of the screen, and your bus on your ticket is all grayed out. And as you make a stop, if you make one stop, you get a little bit of color on your bus. And after 30 stops, we've got way more than 30 stops on the bus, but after 30 stops, your bus is all filled in and it's colorful. Your ticket is filled in and you've been a nut on the bus. And then you get a prize, which is, it's kind of fun. It's a gift certificate to our store. We now have a store. I don't know what's going to happen, but anyway, it's pretty much fun. But the thing that I want to get at with this is that there's a lot of ways to have encounter. And one of the joys for us on the bus is going to places and meeting people. And but you got to be bold enough to let your heart be broken. And that was Paul Ryan's challenge, is he could never let his heart be broken. He always thought he had to be in charge. And that was why I was always sad he didn't go with me, because I thought if he went with me, he could relax a little bit and not be so defensive. But it never happened. Now he's a big money-making guy. So, but the thing is to expose yourself to, like 1619. Listening to the 1619 podcast can be encounter. You can have encounter any place. Our bus is an attempt at giving people little tastes of encounter, because if your heart, the thing I've learned is, as long as I'm protective of my heart, it's, it only has room for a couple of people. But when my heart's been broken open, there's room for the world. Everybody's welcome.
Right. And is that sort of the mystic experience that leads to the language of solidarity and the common good, that the other becomes as important to us as I am to myself?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Well,
sure. Absolutely.
Simone, you've seen a lot. You've traveled a lot of places. I think tonight people would be glad to hear a great story that has a dose of hope in it. Would you give us a story that you particularly like that speaks to an unfolding in history that you think will bring light and healing and new possibilities for us?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Let me think. Okay, let me tell you about these. Oh shoot, I got three stories. I got to decide on one because they were blending in my brain. Okay, I'll do this. This is trusting in the mystical Holy Spirit moment. So I don't know what else is going on, but the in 2015, when we began our bus tour before the Pope Francis came, and we sort of went to parts of the country where there weren't a lot of Catholics, and I felt we did it because we wanted to say, Pope Francis is coming, Pope Francis is coming. So it was great. We had fabulous experiences. But on our first day of the kickoff of that, we were in St. Louis. And after our kickoff rally by the big arch, you know, the gateway to the west arch, and our theme was Bridge the Divides, we went and had a meeting with these women who, after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, these African-American women said, this could have been our son. Our sons are in danger. We've got to do something. We've got to do something. And so they put their heads together and came up with this idea that created this organization called Mothers to Mothers. And what they did as African-American moms is they went to talk to white moms about what African-American moms had to worry about for their kids that white moms did not have to worry about. And it was among the most poignant, moving, incredible conversations because these moms were talking about their worry for the safety of their kids. And this one mom, who was a professor at one of the universities in St. Louis, had two boys, a high schooler and a seventh grader. And she quizzed them regularly on when they were stopped by the police, not if, but when. Keep your hands away from your body. You say, yes, sir, no, sir, and you do whatever you're told, and you don't get any teenage attitude. Well, I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I had a lot of attitude. So the idea of not getting any, I thought was really challenging. But the seventh grader said to her after she'd done this a bunch of weeks, he said, Mommy, how long is this going to go on? And she had to tell him, well, the way things are going, the rest of your life. And I just have to say, I just found myself, I just burst into tears. I was just so worried, so concerned, so hearing that poignant story of the worry of moms. But then what I realized was the sacred gift that they were giving of their vulnerability caused me that encounter caused me to have hope that if we could listen to each other, if we could really hear what's going on, our worry for our children, our worry for each other, that could make a change. That could shift who we are as a society. And so I got this idea. I don't know if it's good. I don't know what I'm going to do with this idea, but I have this new idea that has come out of all of these conversations I've had. Is I think after the election, if there's a new administration, I want to propose that there's a White House Office of Public Listening so that we spend some serious time just listening to the stories. Because I think in listening, there is hope because everyone gets seen and everyone gets heard. Oh, do I have time to tell you another one? I just thought of another one.
You do.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is more hopeful. Okay. So last year we did this series of rural roundtables. I wish I had thought of a better name for it because rural roundtables are very hard to say. But anyway, that's what we did. And we were in Poetry, Texas, about an hour and a half east of Dallas, in a Methodist church built in 1845. I mean, it was just amazing. Anyway, so we're gathering, and we had maybe about 12 people come. Well, this one guy comes in and says, well, we can't start yet. I got to call so-and-so because there's a cow down in the field. You know, you can't leave a cow down. Well, I didn't know that. I'm a city girl. What do I know? So then somebody comes in carrying the casserole because they're going to take it to so-and-so who recently got out of the hospital, and they can't leave it left in the car. We got to put it in the fridge. So we put it in the fridge. Then we get started, and a guy comes in, sorry I'm late, so-and-so's mower got caught in a ditch, and I was helping him get it out, sorry I'm late. So, we start over again. And it turned out that they fairly quickly, in the conversation, they let me know they were so glad that their local hospital had closed, but they were really upset that the grocery store had closed. And I go, you're happy the local hospital closed? Talk to me about that. Oh, yeah. The last remaining physician said he wouldn't send the dog of his worst enemy to that place. I mean, the care was terrible. It's better we drive an hour and a half into Dallas, though getting an ambulance is really difficult. I was like, whoa, well, that's an interesting perspective. I hadn't heard that. But talk to me about this grocery store. Oh, yeah, they were really upset about the grocery store because what is happening is people were moving out from Dallas because housing in Dallas was getting so expensive. So they were moving out and but still working in Dallas. So they would stop at a grocery store, a big box store in Dallas, and bring the groceries out, and it undermined the business for the grocery store. So the grocery store failed, and they were upset. So the city girl, thinks she's going to help. So I say, well, supplemental nutrition assistance programs, SNAP benefits, are a real help for rural economies. It's just come out. It's a 1.6 multiplier. Doesn't that sound like a DC thing to say? It's a 1.6 multiplier, so it gets more money into the community. Kaboom! What do you mean? Those people using those benefits, they're just lazy and they've got to take care of themselves. And they went off on this about individual responsibility and taking care of yourself. And I was like, what? And so I got the benefit of having this conversation. I was able to stop them and say, what are you talking about? You called because a cow was down. You were helping your neighbor. You helped get the mower out of the ditch. You've got a casserole in the fridge. What are you talking about? When I hear you talk about individual responsibility, it means individualism. But you clearly all help each other. What are you talking about? And no one had ever called them on this talking point that SNAP benefits were, wrong. Well, we had this amazing conversation where finally what they came to is what they believe in is communal duty. They're not talking individual responsibility. They're talking communal duty to each other. And if their community isn't big enough to include everybody, they need to stretch their community. But they feel like these federal benefits go from the federal government, bypass the community to the individual. And what really upsets them? It's a crime for that individual family to share. It breaks their community. I was like, whoa. But isn't it hopeful that we can get beyond the sound bites if we take the time to talk?
Very good. Simone, let me just interrupt for a second to assure everybody there's a number of questions about how can we get access to the equally sacred scorecard, and how do we connect with the virtual bus trip, and can we watch a recording of this video later? And the answer to all of that is yes. Leela will be sending out a follow-up email that will provide all that information for everybody who registered for tonight's presentation. Whether you're able to be present or not, you'll get that email. So I promise you all that information will be forthcoming. So Simone, I'm aware that we've been going for about an hour now. I think we've kind of covered a lot of the questions that have come my way. Is there anything else that you would like to close with or not? And then we'll call it a night.
I think the thing that's critically important for all of us in the Christian tradition is that we acknowledge that we're one body, that we're together in this. We're not separate, we're not isolates, we're one body. And what I strongly believe is that the duty of this body is that we all have to do our part. We have to do our part. And figuring out what our part is the important piece. So that when we, when you know your part, act on it, do it, don't procrastinate. And for me, some of you have heard me say this, but my part right now is being stomach acid in the body of Christ, I think. Because my part is to go around and liberate energy, stir up, digest food, stir people up, get it going. But if you don't do your part of picking up that energy and doing something with it, then I become a toxic influence on the body. And we wouldn't want that, right? Mm-hmm. So figure out what your part is and act on it. Mm-hmm. We need you. We need the whole body engaged in this moment. Only that will create healing and a way to move forward. It's both a spiritual truth, but it's the real truth that we all depend on each other. This idea of communal duty, it applies to us too.
Sister Simone, thank you. There are all kinds of lovely comments coming my way that you can't see, but what I'd like to do, as is our tradition here, is to invite everybody who's been on the call tonight. You can't unmute yourself, but what you can do is put your hands together in a silent clap and let Sister Simone know how much you appreciate her time. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. A great pleasure to do it.
Thanks. And we hope to see many of you a week from tonight. And thank you, Sister Simone. Thank you all for joining us. And Sister Simone, looks like you have a question or a comment.
A comment. I wondered, it said we were going to end with a little prayer, but could I don't know if a prayer is planned, but could I end with the prayer that I did at the Democratic Convention?
A prayer is planned, and it was the one that you prepared, so go right ahead.
Okay.
Holy Spirit.
Great. Can I just do it?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So the very first paragraph of the scripture that informs the three Abrahamic traditions tells us the divine spirit breathed over the waters of chaos and brought forth a new creation. Encouraged by this promise that a new creation can come from chaos, let us pray. O divine spirit, during the weeks and months ahead, stir our hearts and minds that we might fight for a vision that is worthy of you and your call to honor the dignity of all of creation. A vision of who we are as a people, grounded in community and care for all, especially the most marginalized. A vision that cares for our earth and heals the planet. A vision that ends structural racism, bigotry, and sexism so rife now in our nation and in our history. A vision that ensures hungry people are fed, children are nourished, immigrants are welcomed. O Spirit, breathe in us and our leaders a new resolve that, committed to this promise, we will work together to build a national community grounded in healing, fearlessly based on truth, and living out of a sense of shared responsibility. In the name of all that is holy, O Spirit, bring out of this time of global and national chaos a new creation, a new community that can, with your help, realize this new promise that we affirm tonight. And so, with profound hope, let we the people say,
Amen.
Thank you.
Simone, thank you. And thank you all, and have a good evening. We hope to see you next week. God bless.